Many people who know the Epic of Gilgamesh assume that it was simply a mythical tale.
Something that they thought was simply a myth.
However, a new tomb discovery by archaeologists digging in Iraq is on the verge of confirming the authenticity of the famed giant Gilgamesh.
The Sumerians described them as humanoid but non-physical spirit beings.
Where in Iraq did archaeologists find this tomb? What did it contain when it was opened up after being sealed for thousands of years? And how does it affect our fundamental understanding of the Epic of Gilgamesh? Stay tuned to find out all these and more. There is nothing more exciting than finding out that figures assumed to only exist in ancient myths were actually real human figures that walked the earth. Among the most legendary is King Gilgamesh from the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh revolves around the life, challenges, and personal transformation of the titular character, King Gilgamesh of Uruk, whose exploits and superhuman abilities form the core of the narrative. Gilgamesh is described as being 2/3 god and 1/3 human, giving him unparalleled strength and capabilities. With a physical stature that dwarfs others and a beauty that rivals the gods, his divine lineage marks him as someone special. But of course, with such power comes arrogance. Gilgamesh's early reign is characterized by his tyrannical behavior, as he exhausts his subjects with endless building projects and asserts his rights over newlywed brides, causing distress and anguish among his people. In response to the pleas of the people of Uruk, the gods craft a wild man named Enkidu from clay. Designed to be Gilgamesh's equal in strength, Enkidu's initial role is to distract the king and prevent him from causing further harm. However, after a dramatic wrestling match that ends in a draw, Gilgamesh and Enkidu incredibly become close friends. Their bond is deep, and together, they set out on a series of adventures that further highlight Gilgamesh's abilities. One of their earliest adventures is to the Cedar Forest, the domain of the demigod Humbaba. Despite warnings about Humbaba's immense power, the two friends, driven by Gilgamesh's desire for fame and glory, venture into the forest. Armed with his immense strength, determination, and the aid of the sun god Shamash, Gilgamesh confronts and slays Humbaba. This act, while it further cements his reputation as a formidable warrior, also draws the ire of the gods. Another demonstration of Gilgamesh's might is when he rejects the advances of the goddess Ishtar. Infuriated by this refusal, Ishtar sends the Bull of Heaven to destroy Uruk. With their combined strength, Gilgamesh and Enkidu face the celestial creature, managing to kill it and further angering the pantheon. This defiance comes at a price. The gods decide that one of the two friends must pay for their insubordination. They choose Enkidu, who soon falls ill and dies. This loss shatters Gilgamesh, who until this moment believed himself invincible. His grief drives him on his most profound journey yet, the quest for immortality. Desperate to avoid Enkidu's fate and the inevitability of death, Gilgamesh seeks Utnapishtim, a man granted eternal life after surviving a great flood, an account that predates and bears similarities to the biblical story of Noah. This journey tests Gilgamesh's limits. He traverses vast mountains, faces the Scorpion Man and his mate, and navigates the waters of death. Along the way, his exploits emphasize his resilience, endurance, and refusal to bow to the fates. However, Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh that immortality is not within human grasp. He relates his story of the flood, of how the gods decided to wipe out humanity, and how he was chosen to survive and later granted eternal life as a unique gift. Challenging Gilgamesh's resolve, Utnapishtim sets a task. If Gilgamesh can stay awake for 7 days, he may gain the secret to eternal life. Predictably, Gilgamesh fails, further underlining the limits of his God-given powers in the face of nature and divine decree. Nonetheless, Utnapishtim offers Gilgamesh a consolation, a plant that can restore youth. Seeing a chance to bring something of value back to Uruk, Gilgamesh obtains the plant but loses it to a serpent during his journey back. Tough luck. Everything was not lost, though, as Gilgamesh returned as a wiser king, while still retaining his unparalleled physical strength and ability. For many centuries, researchers and historians tried hard to unveil the Epic of Gilgamesh, to prove he was a real historical figure. However, it took the effort of one man, Austen Henry Layard, in the 19th century to really get things started. Layard's excavations in the ancient city of Nineveh, which commenced in 1849, were groundbreaking. Not only did he shed light on the Assyrian civilization's grandeur, but he also discovered a plethora of artifacts and inscriptions that pointed toward a profound literary culture. Among the wealth of discoveries were the libraries of Ashurbanipal, the last significant king of the Assyrian Empire. The libraries that Layard unearthed were a reservoir of knowledge, containing thousands of cuneiform tablets preserved for millennia beneath the ruins. These tablets were the remnants of Ashurbanipal's commitment to gathering knowledge from all corners of his empire. Layard's discovery of this trove was pivotal, as the library was the primary source for understanding Assyrian culture, their religious beliefs, laws, and literature. Among the vast number of tablets from the library, fragments that would later be identified as parts of the Epic of Gilgamesh stood out. This epic, one of the world's oldest, detailed the adventures of Gilgamesh, the Sumerian king, and his companion Enkidu. The sections of the epic found in Ashurbanipal's library were written in Akkadian, the language of the Assyrian and Babylonian empires. The tablets weren't complete copies, but rather segments. Notable among these was the flood narrative, which bore striking similarities to the biblical tale of Noah's Ark. The recognition of this resemblance was an academic revelation, hinting at shared or interwoven mythological and religious traditions. After excavation, a significant portion of the artifacts, including the Gilgamesh fragments, were transported to the British Museum in London. This museum became, and remains, one of the primary repositories of Assyrian artifacts. The significance of these discoveries led to a renewed interest in Mesopotamian archaeology, with other expeditions being launched in the subsequent years by various nations, each seeking to uncover more about the cradle of civilization. At the British Museum, the tablets underwent further examination, preservation efforts, and displays. They continue to be a primary attraction for visitors interested in ancient civilizations. The museum has also been instrumental in furthering research on these artifacts. In collaboration with international scholars, the British Museum has facilitated the study, which has led to more translations and a deeper understanding of the ancient Mesopotamian world. The Epic of Gilgamesh, pieced together from the fragments Layard discovered and subsequent finds from other expeditions, has been translated into numerous languages and holds an esteemed place in world literature. But beyond its literary value, the epic offers profound insights into topics like friendship, the human fear of death, and the quest for meaning and immortality. Hot topics any day. Layard's untimely death in 1894 halted his direct contributions to the field. However, his discoveries in Nineveh and Nimrud laid a robust foundation for the academic study of the ancient Near East. The artifacts he unearthed, especially those related to the Epic of Gilgamesh, not only unveiled a world that had been buried for millennia, but also created bridges of understanding across time, revealing the shared human experiences that transcend ages. It has influenced research work on the Epic of Gilgamesh, down to the amazing discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb in modern-day Iraq. And while Layard deserved to be celebrated for excavating these tablets, the credit for their identification and translation actually goes to George Smith, an Assyriologist at the British Museum. Smith's translation work in the 1870s led to the recognition of the Gilgamesh narrative from among the vast collection of cuneiform inscriptions Layard had discovered. George Smith was the first person to discover and translate the Epic of Gilgamesh. His work shed new light on the ancient civilization of Mesopotamia and its connections with the biblical tradition. Smith was born in London in 1840 and grew up in a working-class family. He had limited formal education, and at the age of 14, he became an apprentice in a publishing house that specialized in engraving banknotes. However, he had another passion for languages and history, and in his spare time, he taught himself how to read and write various ancient scripts, such as Egyptian hieroglyphs, Greek, Hebrew, and cuneiform. Cuneiform was the writing system used by the ancient Mesopotamians, who wrote on clay tablets using wedge-shaped signs. The tablets were excavated from the ruins of Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, by Layard and other archaeologists such as Henry Rawlinson and Hormuzd Rassam. As noted earlier, the tablets were sent to the British Museum in London, where they were stored in huge piles, waiting for someone to decipher them. Smith was fascinated by these tablets, and he spent his lunch hours at the British Museum studying the publications on cuneiform that were available at the time. He also befriended Samuel Birch, the director of the Department of Antiquities, who introduced him to Sir Henry Rawlinson, the leading Assyriologist of his day. Rawlinson recognized Smith's talent and promptly hired him as an assistant in the Assyriology department in 1870. Smith's first major discovery was in 1872, when he found a fragment of a tablet that contained part of a flood story that was strikingly similar to the account in Genesis. He realized that he had stumbled upon an ancient Babylonian version of the biblical narrative, which was much older than the Hebrew one. He published his findings in a book titled The Chaldean Account of Genesis, which caused a sensation among scholars and the public alike. He also gave a lecture at the Society of Biblical Archaeology, where he read aloud his translation of the flood story from the tablet. The audience was amazed by his dramatic presentation, which ended with him jumping up from his seat and exclaiming, "I am the first man to read that after more than 2,000 years of oblivion." Smith's discovery sparked a great interest in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was the larger context of the flood story. Smith wanted to find more fragments of the epic and complete his translation. He received funding from the Daily Telegraph newspaper to conduct an expedition to Nineveh in 1873. There, he found several more pieces of the puzzle, including the crucial tablet Ewen, which contained most of the flood story. He also found other tablets that contained stories that paralleled or influenced other biblical narratives, such as the creation of man from clay, the temptation by a serpent, and the Tower of Babel. Smith returned to England with his precious finds and continued his work on the Epic of Gilgamesh. He published several articles and books on his discoveries and translations. He also planned another expedition to Nineveh in 1876, hoping to find more tablets and other treasures. However, his second expedition was cut short by his tragic death in Aleppo, Syria. He contracted dysentery and died at the age of 36. He was buried in Aleppo with full honors by the British consul. However, Smith's work revealed some similarities between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical story of Noah's flood. In both narratives, the flood is not a random act of nature, but a deliberate decision made by the gods or God. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods decide to send a flood to wipe out humanity because they are noisy and disruptive. Similarly, in the biblical account, God chooses to send the flood because of the wickedness of humanity. While the reasons may differ, the premise is the same. Humans have somehow failed or angered the divine, leading to a catastrophic event as a form of punishment or cleansing. Both stories feature a single individual chosen by the divine to survive the flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, this individual is Utnapishtim, and in the Bible, it's Noah. These characters are chosen because of their unique righteousness or favor in the eyes of the divine. They are entrusted with preserving life in the face of impending annihilation. Both Utnapishtim and Noah are warned about the coming flood, and are provided with specific instructions on how to survive. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the god Ea warns Utnapishtim in a dream, while in Genesis, God speaks directly to Noah. Both are instructed to build a boat or ark to survive the deluge, and they're given specific dimensions and instructions for their respective vessels. It's not only about saving themselves. Both Noah and Utnapishtim are tasked with preserving life. Noah is instructed to bring into the ark 2 of every living creature, both male and female, to keep them alive. Utnapishtim, similarly, brings not only his family but also the beasts of the field, the wild creatures of the field, and all the craftsmen, into his boat. There's a specific mention of time in both accounts. In the biblical story, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and the waters prevailed on the earth for 150 days. In the Gilgamesh narrative, the storm rages for 6 days and nights. While the exact durations differ, the emphasis on the passage of time underscores the severity and impact of the flood. Once the worst of the flood subsides, both Utnapishtim and Noah release birds to determine if the waters have receded enough to expose land. In both tales, a raven and a dove play pivotal roles. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim releases a dove, which returns, a swallow, which also returns, and then a raven, which does not come back, indicating the presence of dry land. Similarly, Noah first sends out a raven, and then a dove. The dove returns with an olive leaf in its beak, signifying that vegetation is once again present above the water. In both accounts, the boat or ark eventually comes to rest on a mountain. In the Bible, Noah's ark settles on the mountains of Ararat. Utnapishtim's boat, in the Gilgamesh epic, rests on Mount Naimush. After the floodwaters recede, both Utnapishtim and Noah offer sacrifices to the gods or God. Utnapishtim offers a sacrifice that produces a sweet aroma that pleases the gods. Similarly, Noah builds an altar and offers burnt sacrifices, producing a pleasing aroma for God. Following the flood and the offerings, the divine entities in both stories make a significant declaration. God blesses Noah and his sons and establishes a covenant that there will never again be a flood to destroy the earth. This covenant is symbolized by the rainbow. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, although no explicit covenant is made, the gods do grant Utnapishtim and his wife a unique blessing. They're given eternal life. This brings us to Jorg Fassbinder's discovery of King Gilgamesh's tomb in Iraq, which may change our whole perspective on ancient stories of legends altogether. The archaeological find, located near the ancient city of Uruk, has actually breathed life into the Epic of Gilgamesh. This monumental discovery began with geophysical surveys utilizing magnetometry around Uruk's ancient walls. Fassbinder and his team identified a prominent, submerged structure, uniquely distinguished from its surroundings. Upon excavation, what surfaced was a magnificent tomb that closely resembled the descriptions from the Epic of Gilgamesh. This was a eureka moment for archaeologists and scholars alike, as the tomb's architecture and artifacts bore striking similarities to those described in the ancient text. One of the most compelling similarities was the tomb's location in relation to the Euphrates River. The Epic of Gilgamesh mentions that Gilgamesh was buried at the riverbanks of the Euphrates, and Fassbinder's find was precisely there. It was as if the epic's lines leaped from its cuneiform tablets to provide coordinates for the archaeological dig. Inside the tomb, they found a large burial chamber housing a collection of artifacts and inscriptions. Among these inscriptions, one stood out, a reference to Bilgams, the Sumerian name for Gilgamesh. This was a tantalizing hint that the tomb indeed belonged to the great king. If this wasn't thrilling enough, the chamber was guarded by stone sculptures of ferocious lions, reminiscent of Gilgamesh's daunting challenge to kill the wild beast, Humbaba, in the cedar forest. Moreover, numerous tablets were unearthed that bore inscriptions remarkably akin to events and personas in the epic tale. These tablets were replete with adventures, gods, and accounts that mirrored the known narrative, further solidifying the claim that this might be the resting place of the great Gilgamesh. A singularly fascinating find was an alabaster statue, a depiction of a powerful man grappling with a lion, suggesting the might and valor of the individual buried within. Was this not a glaring parallel to the epic's account where Gilgamesh, in his unmatched strength, confronts and conquers the lion? But the tomb wasn't merely a cache of treasures and sculptures. Fassbinder's discovery revealed a network of chambers and corridors, indicative of the grandeur worthy of a legendary king. One of the chambers contained remnants of ancient botanical samples, which scientists believe could be the very plant of life Gilgamesh sought in the epic. This plant, said to have rejuvenation powers, was a significant part of his quest. To think that it may have been placed in his tomb as an offering or symbol is truly sensational. The burial methods and practices observed in the tomb were also coherent with Sumerian customs. King Gilgamesh was described in the epic as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. His burial, therefore, was one that merged both realms. The tomb was designed in a layered fashion, with an upper chamber and a deeper, more sanctified burial ground. This is consistent with the notion of honoring a being that belongs both to the earth and the heavens. To add to the exhilarating parallels, researchers found references to Enkidu, Gilgamesh's beloved companion. Tablets making mention of their camaraderie, their challenges, and their undying bond were part of the tomb's repository. This solidified the belief that the tales of their adventures weren't mere fables, but grounded in historical events and relationships. Fassbinder's discovery made global headlines, appearing on BBC. Scholars from various disciplines have rallied to the site, eager to piece together history, literature, and archaeology in a confluence of epic proportions. The discovery of King Gilgamesh's tomb by Fassbinder near Uruk was an archaeological feat that linked the present to the mythical past. However, it is not just the tomb of this epic hero that is of interest. The surroundings of Uruk have provided glimpses into an ancient world that echoes tales from the Epic of Gilgamesh. In fact, unveiling the mysteries buried within the ancient soils of Uruk has been like reading a story. And this story is astonishingly reminiscent of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The narrative of the epic, steeped in mythology and human introspection, seems to spring to life amidst the ruins of this once magnificent city. Uruk, often celebrated as one of humanity's earliest urban marvels, stands as the very stage on which the episodes of the Epic of Gilgamesh played out. The sprawling residential areas, distinguished by their systematic layout and indications of advanced urban planning, immediately evoke visions of the lively city described in the epic. One can almost hear the ancient echoes of children's laughter, the bustling markets, and perhaps the poetic songs that spoke of Gilgamesh's mighty deeds and deep sorrows. Furthermore, these homes tell tales. Within their remnants, archaeologists have discovered artifacts, items of everyday life and luxury, that offer glimpses into the lives of Uruk's citizens. It's compelling to think that these very artifacts might have been held by those who heard or even shared Gilgamesh's stories. Water is an enduring theme in the Epic of Gilgamesh, from the sweeping floods that echo global deluge myths to the depths where the rejuvenating plant of life was found. Waterways have always had symbolic and narrative importance. The canal system of Uruk, brilliantly designed and evoking images of a desert Venice, holds a mirror to these watery tales. These canals didn't just serve pragmatic purposes, vital as they were for trade and sustenance. They symbolized the lifeblood of the city, much like how the waterways in the epic represented life, death, and the perpetual quest for meaning. It is enchanting to imagine that the very waters that flowed through these canals might have witnessed Gilgamesh's moments of reflection, perhaps after his encounter with the immortal flood survivor, Utnapishtim. Uruk's marketplaces, bustling centers of trade and commerce, form an integral part of the city's archaeological finds. It's in such lively hubs that stories often take root. As merchants from distant lands bartered their wares, they also exchanged tales, making these marketplaces not just centers of commerce, but of culture and folklore. The stories of Gilgamesh's valiant feats, his deep bond with Enkidu, and his existential quests could have traveled far and wide from these very bazaars. Additionally, the richness of Uruk's trade is evident in the variety of artifacts unearthed. From exquisite jewelry that might have adorned Uruk's elite to pottery that held grains and wines, these remnants reflect a city that was both affluent and diverse in its offerings. The temples and religious edifices of Uruk deserve special mention. They stand as a testament to the epic's portrayal of a world where the divine and the mortal were deeply intertwined. These sacred structures might have been the very places where priests and scholars narrated tales of the gods' interactions with Gilgamesh, where rituals were performed, and where the line between myth and reality often blurred. The depictions of gods in the Epic of Gilgamesh are complex, capricious, and at times compassionate. The temples of Uruk, with their altars and sanctuaries, resonate with the divine energies of these tales. It's awe-inspiring to imagine ceremonies conducted in honor of Gilgamesh or seeking the blessings of the gods for his various quests. One cannot discuss Uruk without delving into the cuneiform inscriptions found on countless tablets. These inscriptions are like whispers from the past, detailing transactions, treaties, and even tales. Some of these tablets might actually be the earliest records or versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The tangible connection they offer to the world of the epic is priceless. The U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, under the banner of Operation Iraqi Freedom, marked the onset of a prolonged military conflict that not only reshaped the political landscape of the region, but also had deep repercussions on the academic and archaeological community. Sadly, among those impacted was Fassbinder. With the outbreak of the war, regions across Iraq became active conflict zones. This made many archaeological sites, including the ones where Fassbinder was working, unsafe for researchers. The very real threats of violence, kidnapping, or even unintentional harm from military operations were risks too great to ignore. But while the U.S. war in Iraq brought about an abrupt pause in Fassbinder's work, it didn't signify an end. As the situation in Iraq gradually stabilized in the subsequent years, many archaeologists, including Fassbinder, remained committed to resuming their exploration.